right? So let's start with today's class, students. So we are going to see types of scheduling today. There are basically two types of scheduling, non-preemptive and preemptive scheduling, right? What is non-preemptive scheduling? Now, I will give you an example for non-preemptive scheduling. Suppose you are studying for your exam. Okay, it's your exams are approaching, and you are, imagine yourself that you have confined yourself in your study room, and you have decided that you will not get up until and unless you complete 3 chapters in a day. Okay. So until and unless you complete 3 chapters, whether it is your friend visiting, or whether it is your mother calling, or whether it's a phone call, you are not going to attend any of them until and unless you complete the 3 chapters. Right? So something like this is considered as non-preemptive. Right? If I join this analogy, this example with computers, so there are certain cases where the operating system decides that it would continue executing one process on the CPU, and come what may, whether there is another process which wants to execute, it will not start executing the other process. It would not allocate CPU to the other process until and unless the current process completes its execution. Got it? जब तक ये वाला प्रोसेस अपना पूरा एग्जीक्यूशन कंप्लीट नहीं कर लेता, तब तक ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम दूसरे प्रोसेस को एग्जीक्यूट नहीं होने देगा. Got it? A very, very simple analogy which I have given. On the other hand, there is preemptive scheduling. Now, preemptive is just the opposite. You are studying, okay? You had set a target that you will complete 3 chapters in a day, but in the meantime, you get a phone call, and it's a phone call from your friend, right? So, what do you decide? Okay, let me talk to my friend. So, what you do, you set aside your books for some time and you start speaking. And then once your phone call is done, you again get back to studying. Now suppose it's your mother calling, you will again go back there. Okay, you'll open the door and you go out and you listen to her. So this is what your work, your concentration keeps breaking. Preemptive scheduling is something of this type. First, the operating system allocates one process to the CPU. So let me explain this. Just a second. Yes. So you have a process here, P1, which is currently executing on the CPU, right? And in the meantime, another process arrives, P2. And the operating system sees that the priority of P2 is higher than P1. Priority of a process is fixed by a number of different factors. Some are internal factors, some are external factors. Internal factors could be if your type of scheduling is based on a first come first serve basis, or if it is like the shortest job or shortest process has to be executed first, right? So there are multiple factors which decide the priority of a process, which the operating system decides, right? So now P2 arrives. So operating system sees that using some criteria, it will decide that, okay, the priority of P2 is higher than P1. So it will stop the execution of P1 and give CPU to P2. P2 starts executing. In the meantime, P3 arrives. Okay. It checks the priority of P3 but finds that the priority of P2 is only high. So it will continue, P2 will continue executing. Once P2 completes its execution, now your operating system will see whether P1 or P3. It has to decide between these two, and it finds that P1 can continue execution. So it will continue the execution. and then CPU will be given to P3. So this is known as preemptive scheduling, where in case of, like, if there is an emergency of, or if there is any higher priority process, the operating system stops the execution of the current process and it gives the CPU to the other higher priority process. Whereas in non-preemptive scheduling, the operating system will not allocate CPU to the next process until and unless the current process completes its execution. Got it? So non-preemptive scheduling, in this type of scheduling, a scheduled job always completes before another scheduling decision is made. That is, before your operating system decides whether to give the CPU, allocate the CPU to the next process or not. So it will first see to it that the scheduled job, the current process, completes its execution, and then only the CPU is allocated to the next process. Therefore, finishing order of the jobs is also same as their scheduling order. Like, for example, if the processes arrive in this fashion, if it is like P1 arrives first, then P3 arrives, then P2 arrives, then P5 arrives. Got it? So this way, if you have a, now P1, P2, P3, it is what? It's coming from different users. That's why 1 is from user 1, 3 is from user 3, and so on. So here, this is the order in which they arrived. So this is itself the order in which the jobs are completed. Okay. The scheduling techniques which use non-preemptive scheduling are FCFS, that is first come first serve scheduling, SJF, shortest job first or shortest job, it's also known as shortest job next scheduling, and deadline scheduling. So these are the three types of scheduling algorithms. If I say scheduling algorithms, what are scheduling algorithms? They are scheduling techniques, right, which are used. A detailed program, already you know that your operating system is a huge collection of various programs. So there are these short programs are known as subroutines. Okay, that is small sub programs. So it has a separate subroutine for scheduling. So different scheduling criteria or different scheduling methods are used, and the type of methods which come under non-preemptive group are FCFS, SJF, and deadline scheduling. And when it comes to preemptive scheduling, there are some other, that is, if I talk about preemptive scheduling, they are SJF. SJF is there in two flavors, that is in schedule preemptive also and non-preemptive version also. Then you have round robin scheduling, right? So these are some of the preemptive scheduling algorithms. You don't have to study any type of scheduling algorithm in detail. Next, a few terms. Many factors determine which scheduling technique should be used in order to have the best possible results. The criteria are CPU utilization. Firstly, now see, the operating system which handles all these things or which pays attention to these factors, it will be considered as the most efficient type of operating system. So first criteria is CPU utilization should be maximum. That is, CPU should not be idle at any given time. Although you cannot totally eliminate this, you cannot make it 100% utilization, but what you can do is you can always minimize the amount of waste of CPU time, right? You can make sure that the CPU doesn't have too much idle time. Understood? Then turnaround time, that is TAT, the amount of time elapsed between submission and completion of execution of a process, the time at which you gave the command for executing a process till the time the complete output you get. So that entire time, that is from submission to completion of a process, is known as turnaround time. So turnaround time is the amount of time elapsed, so that turnaround time should be less, okay, for every process. So completion time minus arrival time. Waiting time, the amount of time a process waits in the ready queue for CPU. What is the ready queue? I had explained to you that all the processes, when they are ready to execute, okay, they come into which state? Ready state. Okay, that means they are waiting in the RAM to be executed by the CPU. So where are they waiting? They all are waiting in the ready queue. It is a queue of processes, queue of ready processes, which are waiting to execute, right? Who will execute? The CPU will execute these processes. So there is a queue of processes known as ready queue, right? So amount of time. Now, I had already explained to you when I was teaching you the process state diagram that if there is any input or output statements, or if there is any kind of interrupt which occurs due to any internal error in the program, your program goes into the ready state again. It might go into the waiting state, it might again go back to the ready state. So the amount of time, that time which the process is waiting, not executing, वो execute नहीं हो रहा है, वो सिर्फ wait कर रहा है कि कब execute हो. So that time is what? It's the idle time for the process, also known as waiting time, right? Where the time where you wait in front of the box office to take your tickets, you are not doing anything, you are just waiting for your chance. So here also the process is waiting for its chance to execute. It has already executed once, but because of input or output statements, it is waiting. So that is the waiting time, and that is the idle time. Hence that idle time should come down, it should be minimized. So this is the waiting time is amount of time spent waiting minus arrival time of the process. So you don't need to be too much engrossed in these formulas over here. You have to only pay attention mainly to what they are. That is, I'm just highlighting these. Number one, CPU utilization, turnaround time, waiting time. That's all. No need to worry much about these, because we are not going to do the numericals. They are out beyond the scope of your textbook syllabus, and we need to keep pace with the syllabus because you have your half yearly exam somewhere in November, right? More terms. Response time. Now what is the response time? Just like the turnaround time, in turnaround time, what was it? The time required, you can see amount of time elapsed, that is amount of time spent between submitting the process and the complete execution. So here there is a small difference. In response time, it is the time between submission of process and first response from execution. Maybe first line of code or first statement, which is, if suppose it is a statement where a is equal to 5. Okay, so that means a variable is created. We don't know, we are not able to see it because it takes place internally, but that time is completely noted by the operating system. So the operating system keeps track of this response time. So this time should also be less. And then throughput, number of jobs completed within unit time, that is total number of jobs divided by total number of time taken, which will give you the number of jobs completed per unit time, that is in 1 unit time. And throughput should be high, that is more number of jobs should be able to complete within 1 unit time. CPU burst time, the CPU time required by a process to execute its continuous executable part, that is amount of time which would be required to execute only those statements which need the CPU. That is, if I have a small program here, like a equals to 5, b equals to I write input, enter a value, okay, and I write s equals a plus b, and I write print s. So over here, some of the statements which need the CPU, only this statement needs the CPU. Understood? But it was a case of a very short program, so only one statement was there which was to be executed by the CPU. What about the large programs where a lot many calculations are there? So it depends upon the size of the program. Okay, the program and the number of, there is a chapter which you might study in class 12, that is analysis and design of algorithms. There you will study which statement, I mean, this is it is actually a subject in computer science engineering where you study how much time is needed to execute by a particular statement. So there you do a complete analysis of a program where one statement is, whether it is a input or output statement, so they are ignored. And if there is any statement where a decision is being taken, or is if there is any arithmetic calculation happening, so these are the statements which are, or if there is any looping statement where number of repetitions is done, which we will be seeing in the looping chapter. Okay, so those statements, they decide how much time is taken by a process to execute by the CPU. So operating system calculates all that depending upon the number of statements in a program, and accordingly it does the scheduling. Okay, so amount of time which is required, it is pre-calculated. That is what time would a particular program need for execution by the CPU. That time is known as CPU burst time. Let's come to first come, first serve scheduling. A very easy type of scheduling. Process which arrives first will be executed first. Very, very simple. Okay, first come, first serve. We have already seen its examples in our daily life. Like you're standing in front of the box office to get your ticket for the cinema, okay, for the movie. So first come first serve is served there, right? You are boarding a bus, first come first serve is served there. Most places, okay, they use what? First come first serve. You are standing in the queue to order something order something at the ordering counter in a restaurant. So there also, what is used? First come first serve. The customer who arrives first is the first one to be served, right? So this first come first serve is used everywhere. The process which requests the CPU first is allocated the CPU first. Got it? A queue, and that process does not leave the CPU until and unless it completes its execution. So this is it's a non-preemptive algorithm. A quick queue is maintained known as ready queue, in which all the processes that want CPU time are entered, and something is mentioned here, FIFO, that is first in first out. So what do you understand by that? First in first out means the one who comes first will be the first one to go out of the queue. The one person who is standing first in the queue will get his ticket first and leave the queue first. So that is why FIFO, which is followed by queues. Next year in class 12, you will study this in a chapter known as data structures. Okay. So the CPU executes the job in the ready queue, that is the queue which contains all the processes ready to be executed by the CPU. The CPU executes the job in that ready queue one by one. Batch processing is one obvious example of FCFS scheduling. Batch processing is a very early operating system, very early operating system. When operating systems were just getting created, right? So at that time, and your computers were not commercially available like they are available now. We used to have centers, places which were equivalent to a large warehouse, and computers used to be there, and those computers were usually very large computers which were directly funded by the government in association with any company. So those computers were not available for all people personally. It was like there used to be people, there used to be programmers who were very skilled, and those computers basically used machine language programming. And for doing that, what was done was batch processing technique was used. So people used to submit their processes, their programs in the form of punched cards. Punch cards was the very early method of input and output. We didn't have keyboards in those times. We didn't have mouse in those times. Also, we didn't have a monitor in those times. You want to give input to the computer, you have to give it in the form of punched cards. You want output, that will also come out in the form of punched cards only. And we had special punched card readers. This all comes under the history of computer, students. Your now, from your course, from your syllabus, history of computers has also been removed. I'm just giving you a small insight into that history. Like in those days, only specialized people, they used to work on computers, because computers were like not fully automatic, they were semi manual computers. Very less part of computers was automatic, and rest, most of the work was done manually. Okay, there were switches and dials and wired plug boards through which expert programmers used to give instructions to the computer, right? So we needed specialized personnel for working on the computer, and not it was not available commercially to people, right? So batch processing was a very early form of an operating system, we can say crude operating system, which was available in those days. We don't need to concern ourselves with batch processing because it is completely an obsolete thing. It's a thing of the past, right? So it's just an example given to you that this was an obvious example of first come, first serve scheduling. But turnaround time for the very first job in the batch is the best, and for the very last job is the worst, because the last job which is there, it waits for all the processes to complete their execution. First job will come, it will execute and it will leave the system, right? So it's good. जो पहले आया, पहले विंडो खुली, उसने टिकट लिया, भाग गया. The last person who is there standing in the queue is the one whose turn will come by the time the movie has completed almost 1 hour. उसके बाद जाके उसका नंबर आता है. So this is what happened in case of first come first serve scheduling. So first come first serve is not used in any type of operating system. It was a very early type of a very early algorithm. In order to get over with the demerits of first come first serve, shortest job next was introduced. So in this type of scheduling, whenever a new job is to be admitted, the shortest of the arrived jobs is selected and given the CPU time. So throughput remains the same as in FCFS, but waiting time improves. That is, jobs don't have to wait for indefinite amount of time, because shortest job next, mostly its preemptive version is used. That is, in case a very higher priority in your system also, there is a combination of all these algorithms, right? First come first serve is also there. That is, when a job arrives, obviously when one job arrives, it has to be executed. But then you see, if you check your task manager, I will just show that to you. I'm going to right click here and open the task manager. So if you see the task manager, you can see that there are some active apps currently which are open. These are the active apps. And there are some background processes. That is, many processes are being executed in the background, and constantly these numbers are changing. It shows how much memory, how much CPU is being utilized right now, okay, how much disk is being utilized. and you can see it in the performance also, like this. Okay, so right now this much of my memory is in use. Okay, hard disk this much is in use, CPU this much is in use. Okay, how many cores are there? There are 4 cores which are working right now. Okay, and various other things are there which monitor, you can, through which you can monitor the processes. So there are some background processes, there are some foreground processes, and uh, there the priority is decided. Those whose priority, those jobs whose priority is not much, they are sent to the background, and those whose priority is high, they are executed first, and time is equally distributed to each, right? So this shortest, so current present day operating systems, they have the good features of almost all different types of scheduling algorithms, and not just the ones which are being told to you in this PPT, but there are various other advanced scheduling algorithms which have been designed by programmers throughout these years, which are being used. Okay, so if you try to categorize, you won't be able to do it, because your operating systems use a combination of various scheduling criteria. जहां जो चीज चाहिए वहां वो चीज use होती है, right? But these are examples of some early operating systems which, when the operating systems what was in its infancy, that is early phases. Okay, so at that time, one at a time, one step at a time, they were just improvising with the different methods. So they observed that using shortest job first or shortest job next algorithm, okay, the waiting time of processes was improved. That is, amount of time a process had to wait, that was significantly reduced. So SJN associates with each job the length of its next CPU burst. Coming to the next, we have deadline scheduling. In this type of scheduling, job with the earliest deadline is selected for scheduling, and this type of a scheduling is mostly used in real-time operating systems because this word deadline is there. So deadline of a job is the time limit within which a job must be completed. If a job overshoots its deadline, it is said to be deadline overrun, and it is calculated as K equals C minus D, where K is the deadline overrun. So you don't need to worry much about this. C is job completion time and D is the deadline. That is, if at whatever time, suppose your job is being completed, it starts from here and it completes at this time, whereas, so what will be your deadline overrun? This will be your deadline overrun. This part will be your deadline overrun. Got it? That is, it took extra time. That much extra time was taken by this process. Preemptive scheduling, we have already seen, we have already discussed this. So a scheduling decision can be made even while a job is executing. That is, while the job is executing, whenever a new job arrives, the operating system decides quickly whether this job has to be given higher priority or not. If it has higher priority over the job which is currently executing, switch the CPU. So therefore, preemptive scheduling may force a job in execution to release the processor so that execution of some other job can be undertaken, and this improves throughput considerably. Throughput is improved considerably. No process has to starve in the ready queue for a long time. Okay, every process gets its chance. The techniques which use preemptive scheduling are round robin scheduling, response ratio scheduling. What is round robin? In round robin scheduling, your every process in the ready queue is given a fixed time. Okay, just like time sharing system. So this is implemented by ensuring that no program gets a second opportunity to execute unless all programs have completed it. So the background processes which I just showed you in the task manager, they all are executing using a time sharing technique. That is, an equal amount of time is given to all the processes. Okay. So one round gets completed, process 1 to process 10. One round is completed, then only CPU will come back to the first process. So this is round robin scheduling. एक के बाद एक processes execute होते जाते हैं. Every process gets some time, equal amount of time to execute on the CPU, right? And then as processes keep completing, they will leave the CPU, right? A small unit of time called time quantum or time slice is defined. So I already have explained this when I was teaching you time sharing. The ready queue is treated as a circular queue. That is why circular queue. So it works like this. One process, second process, third process, fourth process, so like this, and then come back to the first one. So it creates a kind of a cycle. Hence the name circular queue. The programs in the ready queue are processed for the defined time slice one by one. Then we have the response ratio scheduling. So response ratio is normally calculated like this: elapsed time divided by execution time. Job with the highest response ratio is preferred over others. So firstly, operating system calculates this response ratio for all the processes. Then the one with the highest ratio is preferred over the others. So when a short job arrives, its response ratio is high. It completes its execution fast. So definitely it is scheduled for execution immediately. So somewhat it is related to shortest job. Next, a longer job would achieve high enough response ratio only after a subsequent wait. So these were some methods of scheduling which are used, right? All we need to do is just study this. So this whole notes have been given to you. बस आप notes से पढ़िए, okay? And right now, when we haven't started Python, you just go through the notes and prepare that. And once we start with Python, you have to give your maximum time to Python only. Okay, because let me tell you one thing very clearly. These two chapters which we have studied, we are not carrying them forward in class 12th. आपको ये सिर्फ 11th में ही पढ़ना है, right? So you give more time to Python. Next is storage management, and that is why I am completing these chapters quickly, because I don't want to drag with these chapters for a long time. So storage management. Now, this was all about processor management. That is how the operating system manages various processes. What is job scheduling? What is the process state diagram? What happens when a PCB, what all things are there in the PCB, where it is used. So all about managing processes. But then we also have memory management or storage management, which is also an important integral part of any process. Right? किसी भी प्रोसेस को एग्जीक्यूट होने के लिए कहाँ आना पड़ेगा? It has to be in the RAM, that is the memory. Okay, and where is it stored originally? It is stored in the secondary storage device. So storage management is very important. So both CPU and IO system, IO means input output system, they interact with memory. They both need to interact with memory. I am typing a letter. Okay, where am I typing the letter? On the keyboard. On the keyboard, the keystrokes, they just register the code, the binary code which correspond to each letter, and send it to the control unit, that is the CPU. From there, the CU, that is control unit, decides that okay, this is the input which has been given. So it has to be sent to the IO system. Let the IO system manage that input. So IO system will decide if it is an input, so data has to be saved somewhere. Of course, control unit will be instructing the IO system to send the data to the memory. Okay, so data will be saved in the memory. And if data has to be displayed, that also comes from the memory. And then only it goes to the monitor. Okay, So CPU also interacts with the memory, input output system also interacts with the memory. Memory is a large array of words or bytes, and we have already discussed that in detail in chapter 1, where we studied the block diagram of RAM. And when they say memory, it always refers to RAM.